No one expected a clipboard and a smug smile to nearly cost lives. But that is exactly where this story begins. On a quiet suburban street where rules mattered more than people, the neighborhood looked peaceful. Trimmed lawns, pastel houses, and identical mailboxes. Yet beneath that calm surface was a ticking time bomb, waiting for one decision to set it off. That decision came from the HOA board, led by a woman everyone whispered about. The one they called Karen. She believed control was order, and order was power. When residents proposed urgent safety upgrades, she shut them down without hesitation. What followed was not just outrage, but chaos that no policy manual could contain. The upgrades were simple on paper: fire suppression systems for older homes, clear emergency access routes, backup power for medical equipment used by elderly residents. Engineers warned delays could be deadly. Paramedics quietly supported the changes. Even the city hinted approval would be fast, but Karen saw something else entirely. To her, the upgrades threatened uniformity, budgets, and her authority. In meetings, she quoted bylaws like scripture, tapping pages with manicured nails, insisting nothing would change without her approval. Neighbors pleaded. One man mentioned his wife's oxygen machine. A veteran talked about mobility access. Karen folded her arms and said rules were rules. Weeks passed and tension thickened. Emails went unanswered. Requests were returned with red ink and passive-aggressive notes. Karen began patrolling the neighborhood, photographing minor violations, issuing warnings, reminding everyone who was in charge. Yard signs supporting the upgrades disappeared overnight. Rumors spread that fines were coming. The community split into two sides, those afraid to speak and those boiling with anger. Every siren in the distance made people flinch, wondering if today was the day something would go wrong. Then came the night that changed everything. Storm clouds rolled in without warning, knocking out power across the district. Wind screamed through the streets, and rain flooded corners that emergency vehicles needed to reach. Inside one home, a medical device began to fail. In another, a faulty circuit sparked. Phones lit up with frantic calls. But access points were blocked. Upgrades unfinished, approvals denied. As neighbors rushed outside in the darkness, fear turned into fury, and every locked gate, every missing safety feature pointed back to one name: Karen. The storm showed no mercy, and neither did reality. Emergency lights flashed at the far end of the street, but responders couldn't get close enough. Flooded access lanes never widened because of HOA restrictions, forced vehicles to stop short. Neighbors ran through the rain, shouting directions, dragging hoses, improvising where official systems had failed. Someone screamed that an elderly man was trapped inside his house without power to his medical equipment. Another voice yelled about smoke rising from a garage 2 blocks away. Panic spread faster than the storm itself. Inside the chaos, one truth became painfully clear. The life-saving upgrades Karen blocked were no longer theoretical. They were desperately needed right now. Residents smashed open locked HOA gates with crowbars. A pickup truck was used to tow away decorative barriers that had once been praised for aesthetic consistency. Every rule that had been enforced so strictly was suddenly meaningless. Survival took priority over uniform lawns and tidy walkways. Karen arrived wearing a raincoat and clutching her clipboard like a shield. She shouted over the wind that residents were violating HOA policy, that fines would be issued, that everyone needed to calm down. No one listened. A neighbor snapped back that someone could die. Another demanded she unlock the emergency access panel she had personally ordered sealed months earlier to prevent misuse. Karen hesitated, arguing about liability, about procedures, about authority. The delay felt endless. Finally, someone forced the panel open themselves. Firefighters pushed through moments later, visibly frustrated. They worked fast, but the damage of delay had already taken its toll. A family was evacuated through ankle-deep water. The elderly man survived, but only after terrifying minutes without support. The garage fire was contained before it spread, but the smoke damage ruined 2 homes. As dawn broke, the storm faded, leaving behind soaked streets, exhausted residents, and a neighborhood forever changed. Word spread quickly the next morning. Videos recorded on shaky phones flooded social media. Clips showed blocked access points, residents arguing with Karen, and first responders shaking their heads in disbelief. Comments poured in from strangers who couldn't believe an HOA had that much power. Local news vans appeared before lunchtime. Reporters asked hard questions about why safety upgrades were denied, and who made the call. Karen avoided cameras, but her name was already everywhere. By evening, an emergency HOA meeting was announced. Attendance was mandatory. The calm suburban image was gone, replaced by anger, fear, and a growing demand for accountability. The chaos wasn't over. It was only beginning. The emergency meeting filled the community hall beyond capacity, with people standing against walls and spilling into the hallway, all waiting for answers they had been denied for months. Faces once friendly were now tight with frustration. The board members sat stiffly at the front, papers shaking in their hands, while Karen took the center seat, chin raised, expression defensive rather than apologetic. When the meeting was called to order, the room erupted before the first sentence could be finished. Residents demanded explanations, accountability, and change. One by one, people stood to speak. A nurse described how seconds matter in emergencies and how those seconds had been wasted. A father talked about carrying his child through floodwater because gates were locked. An elderly woman quietly explained how she thought she would die alone in the dark. Each story hit harder than the last. The room grew silent, not from calm, but from the weight of shared fear and anger. Every testimony pointed back to the same decision, the same refusal, the same person. Karen finally spoke, insisting she followed procedure. She claimed the upgrades lacked proper paperwork, that budgets needed review, that the HOA existed to protect property values. Her words only made things worse. Someone shouted that property values meant nothing if people were dead. Another resident waved printed emails showing repeated warnings from engineers and city officials. The evidence was undeniable. Procedures had been used as a weapon, not a safeguard. Then the unexpected happened. A city representative stepped forward, announcing an official investigation. Emergency powers would temporarily override HOA authority. All previously denied safety upgrades were approved effective immediately. Gasps filled the room, followed by applause that felt more like release than celebration. Karen's face went pale as her control slipped away in real time. Board members exchanged nervous looks, realizing their silence had consequences too. By the end of the meeting, Karen was formally removed from her position pending the investigation. Fines she once threatened others with were now being discussed in her name. Outside, neighbors talked differently, not as divided factions, but as a shaken community starting to reconnect. People offered help, shared resources, and checked on those most affected by the storm. The chaos had exposed a harsh truth about power, rules, and responsibility, but it also sparked something else, a determination to never let one voice outweigh human safety again. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood transformed in ways no one could have imagined before the storm. Construction crews arrived early each morning, installing fire suppression systems, widening emergency routes, and upgrading power lines. With a sense of urgency that had once been dismissed as unnecessary, the sound of drills and trucks became a reassurance rather than a nuisance. Every improvement stood as a quiet reminder of what had nearly been lost and what had finally been learned. The investigation moved quickly. Emails, meeting recordings, and written warnings painted a clear picture of ignored risks and deliberate obstruction. Karen tried to defend herself, insisting she was misunderstood, that she was only doing her job. But the narrative had shifted. This was no longer about rules or paperwork. It was about consequences. When the final report was released, it confirmed what residents already knew. The blocked upgrades directly increased danger. The chaos was preventable. Karen resigned before formal charges could be announced. She left without the authority she once wielded so confidently. Her reputation permanently altered by the very system she used to control others. Some neighbors felt satisfaction. Others felt only exhaustion. No one celebrated. The experience had been too close, too real. A new HOA board was elected, made up of residents who had stood shoulder to shoulder during the storm. Their first action was rewriting the bylaws, placing safety and emergency response above aesthetics and fines. Transparency became mandatory. Decisions required community input. Power was no longer concentrated in one voice, but shared among many. Trust, slowly and carefully, began to return. Months later, when another storm rolled in, the difference was undeniable. Emergency vehicles moved freely. Backup power kicked in without hesitation. Neighbors checked on each other, calm but prepared. What once triggered fear now revealed resilience. The neighborhood held firm, not because of strict rules, but because of cooperation. The story spread far beyond that street. Other communities questioned their own HOAs, reviewed policies, and challenged leaders who confused control with responsibility. What started as one woman blocking upgrades became a lesson for thousands watching from the outside. In the end, the chaos served a purpose. It exposed the danger of unchecked authority and proved that safety should never be optional. Rules exist to protect people, not endanger them. And when communities stand together, even the loudest voice of control can be replaced by something stronger. Accountability. If this HOA chaos shocked you, hit subscribe for more wild Karen stories. Smash that. Like if you can't believe someone blocked life-saving upgrades. and drop a comment. Was Karen just following rules or going too far?